Happy Friday, true believers. Today we are going to be going over Marvel Comics Presents number 75, which is Chapter 3 of Weapon X. But before we get into the book, I wanted to make an announcement. 74 that we did yesterday, it will be the last video for the time being that I'll be uploading to YouTube. With everything going on and YouTube changing its policies, I'm just going to be uploading directly to Instagram and Facebook. So make sure to check us out there. Now, with that announcement out of the way, let's continue on with this series because we were left with that slow burn of the violence that was happening yesterday where Wolverine first revealed his claws in this series. But before we full tilt get into the book, let's give credit where credit is due. This is Weapon X, Chapter 3. While the professor questioned his mysterious leader about Logan's mutancy, Weapon X manifested his claws. The story and the art is Barry Windsor-Smith. The letterer is Jim Novak with Barry Windsor-Smith. And the one thing that I forgot to add on the last couple of reviews that I wanted to say here is Wolverine was, I believe, created by Len Wein. And then, of course, the X-Men were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So, with that said, this is the aftermath of Wolverine killing that tech. Remember when the professor said, why don't you go in and help that poor man? And watched all the horror unfold on his monitor. So he's kind of playing dumb here with Cornelius. And that's another thing I wanted to clarify. So last night I kept saying Cornelius when we were referencing the professor. Apparently I did not hit my coffee quota like I had hoped so. So forgive me for that, but we're going to continue right here. Cornelius says, if I knew what you were really up to, Professor, I might be very upset with you. Possibly. I've helped you to create a monster. Not a monster exactly. The devil with that. It's a mindless, murdering animal. Yes. But we can make him behave. And then because Windsor-Smith masterfully got everybody's minds in tune of what color references each character, so this is Cornelius. He goes, behave? Good God, man. It slaughtered an innocent boy in here. Then it came after me and the guards. Straight through that blasted window as if it wasn't there. The professor, you must have been terrified, Doctor. You don't know the half of it. So the way that I read this in my mind's eye is, Cornelius is legitimately terrified. And because the professor kind of knows now what they're dealing with, because remember how in yesterday's review how they were talking about, he was talking to this mysterious character, and he's like, why didn't you tell me Logan was a mutant? This would have been pertinent information for me. I like the way he flips it to make it seem like it's his idea, and we'll see that here in a minute. So he's just continuing to play coy. And you see the rage on Logan's face, and I just love the pencil work here because the absence of color where you just get that dark blue and then the blackening of the blood on his face, you can see that he is one upset individual. And Cornelius says, I met his eyes for a second, filled with hate and fury. But I couldn't tell if it was some animal bloodlust or horror at what we have done to him. And then because Logan's still kind of relying on life support, they pull it, he passes out. And disinterested, the professor says, so you survived to tell the tale. Now we should consider it. But the boy is dead, Professor. Yes, it's tragic. Whatever could have possessed him to enter the booth? And that's what I was talking about a few minutes ago when I said we'll get into it, where we know, the audience knows, because we're kind of like the overhead view of this whole thing. We know that the professor led this tech to go in there when Logan's claws were popping, and he wanted to see what would happen. And so Cornelius is trying to tell the professor how he feels, and the professor, kind of trying to be this all-knowing demigod, essentially, of this facility, is just like, whatever. And Cornelius says, we need to contact the police. We need to notify this kid's family. And then the professor, I don't believe police involvement will be necessary. The boy's relatives can be compensated. Secured, let us say. And it just the coldness and the calculation of this guy just makes him like definitely some sort of horror movie monster character, even though, he doesn't have any, what do you call it? What is that called? Hold on a second. I'm waiting for my coffee to kick in. He doesn't seem disfigured, like, how a lot of times a villain will have like a long, elongated face, like the Joker, for example. But we don't really get that with the professor. He just looks like some old dude. But the way Windsor-Smith kind of gives you that foreboding and tells you he's a villain is just look at the way he is bathed in shadows. Now, with that said, speaking of shadows, the professor looks at Cornelius and he goes, perhaps it's time to induct you further into my program, but I will require your explicit trust. Do I have that, Cornelius? Now check this out. We'll go by panel. Cornelius says, I don't know. There's a lot that I will explain. Your trust, Doctor. Offer, and I shall accept. Well, okay then, if you want. I trust you. Thank you for that. And then he says, tell me, Doctor, are you familiar with the term homo superior? Now look at these panels. First, we see Cornelius kind of on the fence about trusting him. And you see the professor, kind of get closer, and you start to see the shadow eclipse Cornelius until the point where he almost looks zombified, like, okay, whatever you want. And so you kind of see right there that Cornelius sort of becomes a puppet. Anyway, they continue to watch the playback of the footage here, and Cornelius says, is a master race or something? And the professor says, to some extent, but no. I mean mutant. Logan is not human. He is, therefore, homo superior. And so then Cornelius, see what I mean? The professor goes into this long diatribe. Like, for example, he goes, I see a man as he ever was, but with his subconscious stripped bare, cut from his very soul, and scored to the bone. Our friend Logan has come into his own at last. He goes, he's saying that before this, Logan trying to be a human being instead of giving into his feral nature, he's plummeting through a purposeless life. He is one day distinguished from the next only by the changing patterns of bruises and blood from last night's drunken fights. But then, inexplicably, the wounds are healed and gone before noon and his first beer. I doubt if he even suffered from hangovers. And then while he's talking, Logan wakes up, tries to pop his claws again, but the professor is able to deter that. And right here, the professor, again looming over Cornelius, he goes, and this is why I'm depending upon you, good doctor. Logan must be reconstructed now. Trained. Then programmed. You can do all of this. Manipulation of the mindless, Dr. Cornelius. It's your calling. So this comic book is just oozing with double entendres, because think about it. When he says, manipulation of the mindless, it's basically kind of saying what Cornelius is, like, because the professor is saying you can manipulate the mindless. But that's exactly what the professor is doing to Cornelius. So Barry Windsor-Smith is just killing it with this comic series. And I mean, he only gets, what, maybe 8 to 13 pages to say this whole thing in an anthology book. And you're gripped by every single moment of it. So with that said, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this comic book and this review. If you have, make sure to give us a like on our social media page. Like I said, for the time being, until YouTube kind of figures out all the new algorithms, I'm going to be posting on Instagram and Facebook, so you're welcome to follow us there. We're also on Twitter. I'll leave the links in the description of the video. With all that said, guys, I hope you have a great day. I hope you support your local comic shop and pick up a copy of this or the collected trade. And I'll check y'all on the next video. Have a great weekend.